Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, in this episode today. I hope to get to talking about my newest phone upgrade, how I begrudgingly upgraded to the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Awesome phone. The upgrade path was not what I typically like to do, but I'll explain that later. But first I want to start with the Apple Car. Apple has officially canceled its plans to build an electric car. That's the headline. That's the headlines you'll see. I will get into why they actually canceled it, but I have a feeling in the back of my head that's part of this canceling of Apple Car was due to the fact that self-driving autonomous automobiles are very, very hard to do. That's not the official reason why Apple Car was canceled. I'll get into those in a minute, but I have a feeling. This is just me. This is my commentary. Maybe you can see the commentary elsewhere. Other people have the same idea, but this is just part of my commentary is that I think part of the reason why Apple canceled the Apple Car project is that autonomous driving turns out it's very, very difficult to do. The actual reason that Apple pulled out of the Apple Car game, why they canceled the whole project and moved a lot of the engineers, a lot of the employees that were working on Project Titan, as it was known internally, they're moving those employees to AI to put their best efforts in that department, and that is one of the reasons why the Apple Car project was definitely canceled. So first of all, there has been listen to my words carefully here, especially if you're on the radio and on this radio station. EV car sales have slumped, but really what's happening is that the growth has slowed. So EV car growth as a part of the automotive market, they haven't gone down to nothing. That's certainly not the case. The growth has just slowed. So they're still selling EVs hand over fist. You're still going to see electric cars increasing their size of the market share. You're going to keep seeing more electric cars on the road. That's not going to change. What the technology that drives the electric motors, whether it's new battery technology, whether it's hydrogen power cells, whatever, you are going to see more and more electric cars on the road. The electric cars aren't going anywhere, but currently the rate of EV adoption growth is slowing. It's still growing, but it has slowed a little bit. So EV car industry is still growing, but the growth has slowed. What has popped off in the recent years, what has absolutely blown the roof off of the industry right now, the tech industry, is AI. And Apple, like any other company worth its weight in salt, understands that, hey, if we're going to be investing billions of dollars into something, let's invest it into the growing industry, not the industry that has slowed its growth. So it's an economic decision above anything else. AI is popping. AI is having its quote unquote moment. So if we're going to be investing billions of dollars into something, let's shift our employee power over to AI. Let's start trying to make our mark in the AI space rather than the slowed growth electric car space. So that is, in a nutshell, exactly what has happened to Project Titan, their electric autonomous car division at Apple, and that's why they've shifted. That's why they've canceled that department, and that's why they have shifted all the resources to AI. AI is hot right now. Electric car adoption is slowing. It's not going nowhere. It's not dying. It's just rate of growth is slowed. I've beat that horse. So I wanted to talk about, even though I know better, I know, especially on YouTube, that talking about Apple, period, is, you might as well be talking about politics or religion. Like it is that much of a, I don't want to use the C word, but there is that passionate of followers and detractors on both sides. When you talk about Apple, you have Apple fanboys and girls just boasting and like, oh, you're wrong and da-da-da-da. And you also have people who hate Apple saying, oh, you're wrong or whatever, or you're right. Or you on the other side of, you have Apple supporters saying you're right about this and the detractors saying you're wrong about this and it's opinions and it's a whole thing and whatever. Apple is generally kind of not great to talk about unless you're reviewing a product, unless you have a product in your hand and you're talking about the latest iPhone or you're talking about the Vision Pro or it's kind of a review of the product. But if you just talk about Apple in general, it's kind of kryptonite and you're going to it's very divisive for some reason. But anyways, I agree with this kind of notion that I've seen, that I've read around the internet, that Apple even just telling the world that they're getting into the automotive market, when they told the world a decade ago that they were getting into the automotive market in earnest, it made a lot of auto manufacturers pop their heads up, kind of like prairie dogs looking around the horizon for threats and for challenges. And Apple's mere mention that they were getting into any tech space makes other players in that tech space peek their heads up and say, oh crap, we have to beat Apple to whatever they've just announced that they are getting into, because we know when Apple comes out with their version of whatever this tech industry is, that it's going to be very popular, that it's going to be maybe not very, very popular, but it's going to be a big direct challenge to their company, to their product, to whatever they come out with. So like I mentioned in the previous episodes, Meta Quest has gotten so much better recently because Apple has announced the Vision Pro, because a while back they announced they're coming out with their own AR, VR, spatial computing device. So other players in the VR AR space had no choice but to kind of ramp up their offerings in anticipation of what Apple was about to do. Same thing in the automotive industry. 10 years ago, Apple said that they were going to get into the car market. They are going to come out with their own Apple car. That made other auto manufacturers ramp up their game, saying, crap, if Apple's getting into this space, we really need to be on our tippy toes. We really need to be ready for anything. We really need to see what's coming. We really need to ramp up our efforts so that we can compete with the Apple car whenever it comes out. Now that the Apple car isn't coming out, I say there's less of a flame being held underneath automotive manufacturers' butts, saying, well, now Apple's not going to be a competitor in this space. Maybe we don't need to be investing ourselves into so much EV advancement or self-driving technology, because Apple's not going to be in the game. They're not going to be in competition. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. The last segment I've been talking about the Apple car, the canceled project. Internally within Apple's walls, it was called Project Titan. And Apple officially putting the nail in the coffin of their automotive efforts. This is just my speculation. This is something you're going to hear me say, that this is my speculation. I'm going to preface this in a way that you don't ever hear any other talk show host on the radio preface anything, that this is just commentary. This is just my own personal speculation. I'm not preaching this as the gospel truth to you to get you all fired up and angry about something. I'm telling you right now that this is just my speculative opinion on this. That when now that Apple has announced that they're out of the automotive industry, the rest of the automotive industry is doing a sigh of relief. Phew, Apple's not making a car. We can scale back our efforts and investment into whatever we have coming out, because Apple's no longer a looming threat on the horizon. As I mentioned in the last segment, just to bring radio listeners back up to speed briefly, Apple has gotten out of the automotive game. They're not going to make their autonomous EV anymore. They have shifted their efforts, their resources, their employees, their investment into the current hot topic, the current emerging tech industry, which is AI, artificial intelligence. That has been what's hot right now. That's been hot for the past few years. Artificial intelligence, we're not going to go into the weeds with this, but artificial intelligence has been around for decades, if not centuries, depending on how you look at it. An hourglass with the sand falling through to measure time, so a person doesn't have to sit there and count 1, 2, 3, 4, and measure the passage of time. They can now just turn an hourglass over and let that machine do the work. Arguably, you could say that's kind of artificial intelligence. Maybe a scarecrow in a field is artificial intelligence because it's theoretically supposed to scare away crows and free up the farmer from not having to do that job. You call it autonomy, whatever you want to call it, but there can be arguments made, right or wrong, that such primitive, quote-unquote, devices are a form of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has been around with us not just for decades, not just since the computer chip was invented, but humans have been finding ways to offload human intelligence into different machines to free up humans to do other things. We've been doing that since we've become humans. That's just what we do. It's one of the things. Work smarter, not harder. So anyways, AI is the big thing right now. Apple has shifted the resources from its automotive department from the Apple car into AI because that's what's making money right now. That's the emerging market. That's the whole thing. EVs, honestly, I think Apple getting out of the automotive market, and I know in a lot of headlines want to say that it's getting out of the EV market, but that's not really what it is. That's not the big bombshell here. It's that Apple is getting out of the automotive market, period. Not just they're not making an EV, they're just not making a car. And that's kind of huge. As it pertains to EVs, I think it is a catalyst moment right now for EVs that the growth has slowed. Sales are currently slow. Growth is still happening. Like the EV market is still growing. It's just where it was, if you're seeing my hand on YouTube here, where it was growing like this, now it's growing like this. It's still growing. It's just growing slower. While AI over here in the background is like, boom, it just shot off the charts. But EV is having a moment right now. Electric vehicles are having a moment right now, which I am all in favor for, of every automotive maker stepping back and saying we need to reevaluate this market. We need to reevaluate our relationships with the government. We need to reevaluate our relationships with infrastructure. We need to reevaluate our relationships with customers on how electric cars move forward from here. And again, mark my words, EVs aren't going anywhere. The market is still going to grow. The future is still electric, but we're at a moment now, a decade, 12 years or so into EV manufacture in earnest. I know a lot of you are screaming, well, GM had the EV1 back in the 90s and da-da-da. I say I mark the start of the current EV market as the release of the Tesla Model X back in 2012, 2013, around that time. So about 10, 11 years. I think that's when the EV market, and I think we can all agree on this, really just exploded. No pun intended, because EV fires are actually very, very rare. They are the shark attack headline of the automotive world. Very rare, but very flamboyant, very eye-catching, very terrible, actually. EV fires are horrible. But EV market, the entire industry is having a moment where it's kind of resetting, reevaluating. Where do we go from here? We pushed this so far. Lithium mining has caught up. The truth about EVs and how good, how well they treat the environment is now being questioned by everybody, not just all. It's kind of funny that the alt-right pulls the environmental card when talking about EVs. That's funny to a lot of people, but it's true. Manufacturing of electric vehicles is horrible for the environment. The end product, the EV actually driving around, not polluting, not putting anything out into the, I say not nothing, it does. There are still particulates. You get really pedantic and in the weeds with it. And I've seen articles being written that EVs actually, they pollute more in this aspect, in that they are heavier than their counterparts, and that they go through tires faster, and that when they drive down the road, they're kicking up more dust than their lighter cousin cars, and they're kicking more dust up off the road. It's scratching. It's really scratching and digging to kind of be to drag EVs through the mud, if you will. But it is true. Lithium mining is horrible for the environment. It's usually done in third world countries at the cost of abysmal human labor. It's EVs aren't this when they were first touted, and I've said this. If you've listened to Geek Therapy Radio since 2017, you've heard me say this a number of times. I've said it so many times on EV that when you go back to cars like the Prius, hybrids when they were first kind of coming out, the whole marketing strategy, and this is what I have disagreed with from the beginning, was the whole marketing strategy was marketing hybrids and marketing EVs to, pardon my French here, tree huggers, to people. I don't mean to denigrate whatever you're passionate about, but they kind of were marketing Priuses and electric cars to hippies and Save the Whale bumper stickers and Kiss a Tree people and all that, which I'm not knocking y'all. I'm just saying that was the wrong market to go after. You're probably not gonna find a whole lot of investment among a drum circle. Though they're probably not the most well-heeled of individuals. Yes, you have yuppies and people that want to lean a certain way politically because they, like the smell of their own farts, as we've seen on South Park so eloquently stated. But there was certainly that element. There were certainly well-heeled hippies, for lack of a better phrase. But that wasn't the move. You branded this new technology as being this great thing, but you focused the ads and the placement and the target market on people that were environmentally conscious, which was the wrong move. I think that it's just my opinion that marketing hybrids and marketing electric vehicles to quote unquote greenie weenies set back the green movement by decades. Hybrids, electric cars, whatever you want, they should have been marketed to just the general American. They should have been marketed to Central America, to the folks, in the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma and in Iowa and just kind of more in the Midwest and out west in California and New York and Florida and Michigan and Minnesota. Like, you should have marketed it towards real people. And the strategy should have been not to kind of force this. You buy this hybrid, buy this electric car because it's good for the environment, buy it because it's green, buy it because you can wear your politics on your shoulder. That was stupid in my opinion. It should have just been marketed as this technology. Here's why this technology works. It saves you money at the gas pump. Electric vehicles are insanely fast, insanely low maintenance, super duper fun to drive, instant torque anywhere in the power band. It breaks your neck with how fast these things are, which has actually turned out to be kind of a problem. It should not have ever been marketed as something just for the green people. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I've been talking about in the last segment kind of how hybrids and EVs, the marketing strategy in this case, was horrible. It's something that I've disagreed with from the very beginning. First seeing Toyota Prius commercials where they're going to like recycling events where people are hoisting plastic bottles into the back of Priuses while wearing their tie-dye shirts and whatever like that. Like you marketed it wrong. That if a technology is going to stand on its own 2 feet, it has to be marketed in a way that showcases its actual strengths as a technology, its actual strengths as a product, instead of wrapping a product in an identity. I know that's a very popular thing to do, but as far as the green movement, as far as environmentalism is concerned, I think that marketing hybrids and marketing EVs at the start to environmentally conscious people was the wrong move. It kind of forces like, hey, if you like the environment, you need to buy this hybrid and you need to buy this electric vehicle because look how many plastic water bottles you can put in here. Look you can fit a leatherback sea turtle into the back and release it back into the ocean. What in the heck is that all about? That was the wrong move, and maybe it was an initial I don't know, push wave. Obviously, hybrids and electric vehicles are here and they're here to stay, and it's actually turning out the argument now is that hey, and I tend to agree with this, that the perfect vehicle, the perfect commuter. Let's just be real here, like. Depends on what subcategory of vehicle you're talking about, what the usage case, because you could say the perfect vehicle is a plug-in hybrid. Well, somebody living in the Sahara Desert that has to drive over sand dunes and everything is like, well, that's not my perfect vehicle. My perfect vehicle is a four-wheeler or even a crazy six-wheeler. If you live off in the Arab Emirates and you're driving your six-wheel Mercedes over the sand dunes at 100 miles an hour. So the perfect commuter car, let's just say for most Americans and most probably Europeans in a metropolis, I do agree that it's a plug-in hybrid. My ideal car, in my opinion, like if I could make my own car, it would be something like a Volkswagen GTI hatchback that can get 100 miles on batteries and then another 100 miles, 200 miles on gas. It's basically a battery that can run for 100 miles before needing recharging, and then maybe a 7 or 8 gallon gas tank, maybe just a 5 gallon gas tank. That's kind of my perfect car because the battery is going to cover 99.9% of all the average person's needs, getting to and from work. Most people, I know there's people listening to this right now who drive a lot more than this, but most people do not drive 100 miles in a day. Most people don't drive 100 miles in a day. I think the national average is like 20 miles in a day, typically is what most people drive, 20 to 30. So having a battery in a car that gets you 100 miles, let's say there's extra trips that you need to take. Oh, I need to go to the grocery store. Oh, I need to go. I need to pivot and go pick up my son from karate and whatever, things happen. 100 miles is kind of that perfect like daily usage case buffer that would cover those kind of extra moments where you need to pivot and do other things. And then you have a gas tank to take over. So plug-in hybrids do exist. My minivan is a plug-in hybrid. It's the 2018 Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid. Gets about 30 miles on the battery, which is perfect for our typical daily use case. And then it has a gas tank that takes over. It's like a 15-gallon gas tank. I can drive 600 miles easy, 550 to 600 miles easy on a tank going on a road trip. But when we're at home and we're just going through the daily activities of taking our son to school and my wife going back and forth to her job, that the 30 miles usually covers all that. And then you have that big gas tank for driving to Virginia or wherever you want to go. That's kind of a perfect vehicle. And I think a lot of people are realizing this isn't just my speculation. This is what I see and what I notice and what I hear and what I read all over the industry, is that plug-in hybrids, we've kind of settled into this like kind of consensus for the most part that plug-in hybrids are, as far as a commuter vehicle is going, as far as just something to get you back and forth, to cover your daily routines, plug-in hybrid. The new Toyota Prius finally looks cool, and it has a very usable, like the Prius Prime is a very usable plug-in hybrid. So you have X amount of miles that you can get on the battery before the gasoline kicks in. It's a perfect world. It's a perfect blend of both technologies. And going back to what I was saying earlier, let me turn off my air conditioning real quick. How hybrids and EVs were marketed towards greenie weenies, as I call it sometimes. And again, it's not to denigrate your any passion for the environment. I like the environment too. Actually, if I can get sidetracked just a little bit, which is what I do here on Geek Therapy Radio, I'm a big fan of efficiency. I'm not necessarily out there chaining myself to a tree or walking 20 miles to avoid using gasoline or electricity or what have you. But I'm just a fan of efficiency. What is the least amount of energy required to perform a task? That's just me being a tinkerer. That's just me being like super, just thinking about where every electron is going, where every bit of hydrocarbon is going. I just like to think about what's the most efficient way to do a task. But within the same breath, I also like a lot of power. I wish I could drive a Ferrari. I had a V8 muscle car for a while, still have it, still need to sell it. Like I have my electric vehicle, but I also still have my V8, and I'm always going to have my DeLorean 6-speed manual V6. Not very powerful, but still, I'm just a fan of technology. I'm a fan of how things work, of mechanical things, of energy. But as far as environmentalism is concerned, I'm just a fan of efficiency. Like, again, what is the least amount of energy, either from whatever source that energy comes from? What's the least amount you need to perform a task? That kind of thing excites me. And It's like trying to hypermile in actual real life. If you hypermile on the road, everybody hates you. If you are in a Prius trying to get 90 miles a gallon or whatever you got to do, and you're sitting there on 59 in a 65 zone going 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour to get as most miles out of your car as possible, first of all, you're going to cause an accident. You're a danger to everybody else on the road. Second of all, nobody likes you when you're doing that. It is a very selfish endeavor to pursue, to actually, if you're trying to hypermile every day and you're holding up traffic and doing whatever. So yeah, I've said my piece on that. Hybrids, electric vehicles, all that stuff the marketing campaign was terrible. I think was very short-sighted. It's very short-sighted is a better way to put it. Let's market these vehicles. Let's market this technology to people that care about the environment, which was the wrong move. You should have convinced Bob in Iowa why he should get an electric car. And the way you do that is you don't tout the identity attached to it. You just tout the technology. You just tout the pros of the technology. Here's why this is super cool. Here's why you'd want this, because it's super fast. It's instant torque. You can plug it into your wall outlet and drink beer and watch football while your car gets more fuel, quote unquote, in it. That's all the stuff that should have been played up. It shouldn't have been attaching electric cars and attaching hybrids to these images of polar bears riding around on broken icebergs. That was short-sighted. That it didn't, obviously it didn't, in the long run for the future of this technology, it wasn't the best move in my opinion. Let's move on. So hold on. My wife got home. Let me acknowledge her existence. And I'm back. Wanted to move on to what I hinted at earlier, assuming anyone's still listening, because you talk about Apple, you talk about electric cars, you talk about hybrids and things, and if you don't toe the line on those subjects, then certain demographics might kind of fall off. But I'm moving on to my current phone world. So I'm sitting here at my desk. I've got my Z Fold 4 plugged in. I almost knocked over my coffee. My Z Fold 4 here plugged in, because every day, I'll show you what my routine is right now every day, because this plays into why I have upgraded a phone way sooner than I typically like to. I've shown you all my password here. As I open this up here, every day on my Z Fold 4, I check for an update. So I go into my settings here and I click this and checking for software updates. And there's probably not going to be one because I haven't read that anyone was announced. Your software is up to date. Great. I'm on One UI version 6.0, current version F936 UT1 XAD whatever. It's the patch. The most current patch is from February 2024. But every day I check for an update on the Z Fold 4 because of that issue I explained in the previous episode, where the S Pen's not really working, where the screen rotation is extremely finicky and just stops working. Whatever that chip is malfunctioning, that controls the gyroscope and the barometer and the magnometer, whatever you call it. Everything that kind of senses the S Pen, senses the orientation of the phone. That chip is not working correctly. It's getting gummed up. Like it works for the first few seconds you first boot up the phone, and then it kind of spazzes out. And I'm hoping that's a firmware issue. But in the meantime, the phone is barely usable in its current form. My Note 9 is long in the tooth, which I'll explain in the next segment. Let's talk about the S24 Ultra and my current phone situation in the next segment. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the final segment of Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. I've been talking about my current phone situation. My Z Fold 4 is not working properly, which basically makes all the reasons that I got it not functional. I still love the Z. I love the form factor of it. I love the folding aspect of it. I love that it opens up into this bigger kind of small tablet kind of orientation, and that you can draw all over the screen with the S Pen. But screen orientation isn't working. The S Pen isn't working. That chip that controls all of that is fritzing out. Is just not working, and it's making the rest of the phone really not much usable. All the features that you bought the phone for are now kind of moot because that chip is malfunctioning. The chip seems to work for the first few seconds after a fresh reboot, and then it fritzes out. So I'm hoping that it's a firmware update. When is the next, Samsung Galaxy firmware update going to come out for the Z Fold 4? Probably within the next few months. I think I've heard March bandied about, but we'll see. And I don't know if that's going to really fix the issue. I have a feeling, though I'm hopeful the firmware update fixes the issue, I have a feeling that I'm going to have to send the phone back to Samsung for servicing. Either way, I went back to, for a couple weeks, my Note 9 here, which my wife still uses her Note 9 with no issues that I know of. It's still a good phone. It's still very usable. When I was using it for 2 weeks, as a phone, it was very functional. What I was asking of it was showing its age, video editing and making YouTube shorts, and constantly on it with my work. We use Microsoft Teams to talk and send pictures and files and things like that. And it was just, my phone was hot all the time, and it had to be constantly attached to the charger because it would just literally burn through the battery very quickly. So I was not, between the Z Fold 4 not working and the Note 9 showing its age in my use case scenario, I was like, I don't know what to do here. I looked at my watch. When is the last time I upgraded a phone? I think it was November of 2022. We are now in February of 2024. So a year and a half, maybe less than a year and a half, more than a year. I can't count the months right now on the fly. But typically, before I even consider upgrading a phone, is at minimum 2 to 3 years is when I usually upgrade a phone. It's been longer than that, even in the past. Like, I've gone 5 years. What I used to do was I used to not buy the latest and greatest phone. I would buy one from, 1 or 2, maybe even 3 generations ago. So in the old days where my Z Fold 4, well, I wouldn't have got the Z Fold 4. I would have gone from Note 9 to if I was still using the Note 9 today in February 2024, if I had gone that long, this thing came out in 2018. If I had gone 6 years between phone upgrades, which is totally fine, phone use, day-to-day phone use is kind of plateaued. Yes, batteries get better. Yes, the cameras get better, but actually just sending text messages, making phone calls, getting on YouTube, scrolling social media, a phone from 2017, 2018 is still going to be just fine. Anybody out there still rocking a Galaxy S8 is still going to be having just a dandy experience day to day using a smartphone. So typically how I upgraded phones is I would have been on this Note 9 for 5 years or whatever, and then I probably would have upgraded to something like the S21, Samsung X21, something like that. But recently, the past 2 times now, when I upgraded to the Z Fold 4, it was the kind of latest and greatest. I let the folding phone technology marinate a bit. I did not get the first Z Fold. I didn't get the Z Fold 2. I did not get the Z Fold 3. I said, okay, if I'm going to jump to the folding phone, I think 4th generation is probably, they probably worked out a lot of kinks, and you can probably jump on the tech now, which is what I did with the Z Fold 4. Now, the issue with the Z Fold 4 is not related, and I don't believe it's related to the folding screen ability, because the sensor that is malfunctioning it's not the sensor that necessarily detects if the screen is open or closed. It might be, but I don't believe it is. It's the sensor that senses the phone's orientation in space, how is it rotated or whatever, and is the S Pen getting close to the screen or not. It's that chip that's malfunctioning. So I don't think it's related necessarily to to the Fold 4. I've only heard one other person on planet Earth. It was a comment on my last episode, said that he had the same issue. He went back to his S20, I think he said, his Note, what is it? Note 20, S20, whatever it is, the 20-something. That because his Z Fold 4 was exhibiting the exact same issues. He's the only other person on planet Earth that I've heard mention that he's had similar issues to what I'm having. There's nobody, unless I checked it right now as I'm recording again, there's been nobody talking about it on Reddit. There's been nobody talking about it on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Twixter. I've not seen this come up. I've not seen any YouTube videos uploaded about it. I've not seen any YouTube shorts. I've not seen any TikToks. I've not seen anybody talking about this issue other than me and one other human being who just so happens to listen to Geek Therapy Radio or found Geek Therapy Radio. So it's not a widespread issue. I think it's kind of unique to just a few users, unless it's about to pop off, unless this little chip in here was a time bomb, unless the last firmware update was a time bomb for that chip, and then you see more people, it start happening to more people. But mine's been doing this for well over a month, and I think if there's more devices prone to it, that you would hear a lot more about it. Either way, hope a firmware update fixes the issue. I don't know. Either way, I needed a phone that could keep up with modern workloads, which is why I upgraded to the S24 Ultra, which I am holding up to the camera here right now. Excellent phone. There's a little bar, the QR code on the back here. Let's see if they need to blur that out when I edit this video together. But by the way, this is on YouTube, Geek Therapy Radio podcast on YouTube. I upgraded to the S24 Ultra, and I've been putting it through its paces. I said, if I need to upgrade a phone right now, if I need a new phone that can keep up, then I need, one of the best, if not the best, camera systems in any smartphone in the world right now. I looked at S23s, but the price wasn't that much different from the S24, and the S24 has arguably on paper slightly better camera specs. It's negligible to the S23. There's difference in telephoto, and the telephoto sensor size is bigger so you have less telephoto, less optical telephoto on the S24. On the S23 you have 10x optical zoom on that, but on the S24 you have a bigger sensor. What's 40 megapixels? What is it? It's higher megapixel sensor in the telephoto lens, but it's only 5x optical. In the end, the difference between the 10x digital on the S24 and the 10x optical in the S23 is negligible. I've even seen people say that the 10x zoom, even though half of it is digital on the S24, looks better than the S23 because you have more pixel density, more megapixels on that sensor. I don't. That's not a mode that I'm going to use very typically. I use it sometimes. I just know that it looks great. I know that especially when you have enough light and you're able to crank that ISO down to as low as possible, which I think is like 50 ISO on the S24 at least. I don't know what the minimum is on the S23. I think it's minimum ISO on my Note 9 is a minimum of 50. But anyways, if you give the phone enough light and you crank that ISO down, you get stunning. It's too good to be a phone, and it's very usable. I've already made a video with it that I put up on YouTube Shorts that is very popular, did very well with the S24. It looks great. I'm trying to kind of lighten my EDC, my everyday carry, and it's fitting the bill. I do like the S24 Ultra. It's just that I had to upgrade it way sooner than I usually like to. That's this episode of Geek Therapy Radio. You hear the bump music coming in. If you don't remember anything else from these episodes, remember that you are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love. You are worthy of receiving your love. I'm looking to you in the eye on YouTube here. And you're worthy of your own self-respect. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Do something nice for somebody else, even if it's just saying hi, even if it's just kind of holding the door, even if it's just kind of using your blinker in traffic for once. Don't get me started on that. Just be a good person. Put some good into the world. Just don't be a D word. That's all. And if you are being a D word, talk to somebody about it. Check in with somebody. Why you acting like that? There's usually something underlying there. You're worthy of love. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Support your local businesses, and I will talk to you later.